are, guys, the Evolve Diablo Bamboo. Now, this surprisingly is quickly becoming my favorite out of the two boards, but I'm going to touch on that in a separate video because that, of course, is the Bamboo Diablo versus the Diablo Carbon. Separate video. But in terms of the ride of this one, I can't explain how different the ride between these two boards are. It is insane because they don't feel like they're the same skateboard, and all you're doing is just changing the deck that you're riding on. It feels like two completely different skateboards made by two completely different brands. And although the changes aren't as mental as you think that they might be, the effect that it has on the performance of these boards is insane. Now, first thing I've got to touch on is I'm really drawn between which one of these two boards looks better. I thought the Carbon looks better, but when I look at the Bamboo on a wall, I kind of feel like this one looks better. Let me know in the comments which one you think looks better, but I'm going to touch on the first thing first, which is going to be, of course, the most important thing, the ride. This new deck being a little bit thicker than what we saw on the previous generation, the Hadean Bamboo, has had numerous changes in terms of what this board is able to do. Now, for those riders that perhaps maybe wanted a bamboo deck but might not have been able to be accommodated because of their build and their weight and their size, this hopefully will give you a better chance of that because it is a stiffer, thicker deck, so of course it's going to be able to take a hell of a lot more. And it just means that it's going to be more durable, so this thing can take a hell of a lot more abuse, which is always great. Now, the way that affects the ride, coming straight from a Hadean and jumping onto this Diablo board, you do feel a big difference because the Hadean deck is a little bit thinner. It's a lot more springy, a lot more spongy, a lot more unpredictable when you're carving around. And it's one of the reasons why I started to draw towards the Carbon Hadean as opposed to the Bamboo Hadean. But I've touched on this in many, many videos, how as I developed as a rider, Carbon started to become my favorite. Now, that's not the case with this one over here. If I had to pick one out of these two boards, actually, do you know what? I'm going to leave you hanging. I'm not going to tell you what that answer will be. We'll save that for the VS video. But overall, the ride is so much better. It still has that springy sponginess that you expect from a bamboo deck, but it just seems a little bit more controlled. It's not as unpredictable and as crazy as what we had on the Hadean Bamboo series of boards. It being thicker doesn't compromise on its ability to kind of give you that springy, wavy kind of, it's really difficult to put into words. That kind of like floating sensation that you get on a bamboo deck, that is still very much present in the Diablo Bamboo. But what you get is that ability to be able to crank the deck and carve and turn and make adjustments much sharper and much deeper than you would be able to do on a stiff carbon deck. The deck being bamboo means that when you use your heels as you're carving in and out, you can really, really crank your heels down, push them down, throw the weight around of your body and get the board to twist and contort, which really means that you can get low into your carves, you can throw the back end out while you're carving. Carving on this board is just uncomparable. It's safe to say that I've not been on another bamboo deck, including the Ownboard Bamboo, which is one of my all-time favorite boards, as you guys know, but carving on this deck is unmatched so far. I've not been on another bamboo board that offers as much carve, as much flow, as much control, as much bounce and spring and snap as what you experience on this board. It is so much fun to be crouched down like a little frog, just throwing the crap out of this deck on the asphalt and just hearing the wheels squeal and try to grip onto the surface of the road for dear life. So, I mean, you can tell by my reaction, guys, the ride on this board is unmatched. If you like making a board go sideways, you like carving, you like really just like flowing down a road and just trying to snake your whole way down the bottom of a road, this is the board that will do that to the most enjoyable degree that I've experienced so far. Not just from Evolve, from anyone. So the ride on this board is 10 out of 10. Now, of course, I got a bit carried away there. I was meant to start the video off by explaining what the differences are between the Hadean Bamboo and, of course, the Diablo Bamboo, which is what I have over here. Now, as I've already mentioned it, the deck is the same shape. It's just thicker. The grip tape on the Diablo versus the Hadean is much more coarse, so you're much more locked in. But the W concave that you have with this board is pretty much the same. It's a little bit more aggressive than what we see on the Carbon Diablo, in my opinion. The drop down is also a little bit more exaggerated than what we see on the Carbon version of this board. But it's exactly the same sort of dimensions in terms of the the concave and the drop down is what you experience on the Hadean. Now, aside from that, the deck being thicker, we've also got the new trucks that are 20mm wider, and because they're now top mounted and the top plate or the base plate isn't sunk into the deck of the board, it means that the board actually sits 5mm lower than what we saw with the Hadean Bamboo board. It's also going to be the bigger motors, the 6374 motors that we get on the Diablo versus the 6368 motors that we got on the Hadean Bamboo. We also have the upgraded ESC, or the 2.0 ESC, that's been designed by Evolve from the ground up, which has a bunch of safety features like an overheating feature inside the board, where automatically, if you're riding in a high mode, the board starts to overheat. It will drop you down into a lower mode until all of the components inside the board get to a much more acceptable temperature, which means that you don't have to worry about any overheating issues yourself. You just ride, and the board has safety features to make sure that it self-preserves the components inside the board and also keeps you as a rider much safer on the board as well. It also has an overcurrent feature as well, where the board is able to draw a little bit more current when you're going at full speed, and you'll get a little vibration once it needs to kind of pull back on the amount of current that it's pulling from the batteries. Now, this kind of like protection feature will allow you to pull much more power from the board's battery for roughly about 8 seconds, and then afterwards you'll get a little vibration on the remote just letting you know that it's going to calm down on how much power you're getting, but that doesn't have any jerking or impact on your ride. It's just letting you know that the power will start to kind of like draw back, but it's not something that you can personally feel like, oh, like a turbo button on a board where now I'm like, oh, now that feature's gone, I can't feel like that nice pull as I pull the trigger. So it's a lot more subtle than that, but it's just a nice little safety feature that they've thrown in there that I love, that of course can be turned off inside the remote. Now, additionally, what you can also do with the remote is you have a lot more options to be able to check on the health of the board. Of course, you can adjust the acceleration, the braking, the top speed, the aggressiveness of how the board performs on the trigger. All of this can be adjusted on the Evolve app, which is definitely worth using with their brand new remotes that they've got, which is the phase remote. If you've a long-time user of Evolve boards, you know that the previous remotes were the same design, same shape, but they were made from plastic, not metal like this. These are almost indestructible. The previous ones, I used to break like crisps, or I don't even know what you could say, like twigs. Like, it was insane how many of those I went through. But this one, tried and tested. You've seen me throw this thing up in the sky. It bounced on the ground, absolutely no problems. Much, much better remote. And you can also check the battery's health, of how they're balanced or what the voltage is. You can check all of that in the remote now, which is a feature you couldn't do on Evolve boards before. So if there's an issue there, you're able to identify what the problem is, where in the board the problem is, and then you can contact Evolve about getting that sorted out, which I think is a really, really nice feature that they've included. Now, the wider trucks do affect the Carve. You've already heard me talk about the road. You have much more control. Of course, you can also adjust the base plate. You can push it forward to give you a little bit more stability, or bring it back to give you a little bit more carve. I've been pretty satisfied with how these come stock from Evolve, but the trucks are wider. 20mm means you have wider stance on the ground, you have more control, you have a lower center of gravity because of the new base plate mounting, just generally more stability at top speed, and also a hell of a lot more control while you're carving. But one thing I do have to mention is that this board being bamboo, it's not all sing and dance. I feel like this board is geared towards the riders that aren't just going to be full pinned on the trigger everywhere that they go. Full acceleration, Corsa mode every time they're on the board. I feel like that kind of, in my opinion, leans more towards the carbon. This is much more carving, sliding, sideways, like cornering this board to within an inch of its life. I feel like that's the kind of rider that's going to really enjoy this. And the bigger motors with that bigger power means that you can really torque the trigger, pull it back while you're coming out of your carves, to throw the back end of the board out even more, or even to find grip while you're in the middle of carving by getting the wheels to spin harder, quicker and faster during your carving. I feel like that's the type of rider that sits leaning towards this board. And if you just want to full pin it straight line, you're not really a carver that much, you just want to pin it down a road, that's where the carbon kind of sings a little bit more. The reason for that is because of that springy deck. Even though the trucks are wider, I feel much more stable at full speed on these boards when I'm in the carbon versus the bamboo. So that's definitely worth mentioning, but that's my opinion. Some of you might like it, but I feel like I'm not going to be full pinned top speed all the time in this board. I'm using the torque, and I'm going to be using like 90 to 95% of the top speed in this board. Whereas with this board, it's 100% of the top speed all the time. But that's how I ride. I just wanted to mention that, but I'll touch on that in much more detail when we do a VS of both of these boards. Now, another big difference is going to be in the weight. It's not a huge difference, but it still means that this is very much a skateboard that you can carry with one hand as you're getting off of a train or walking up a flight of stairs, which is a big deal. A board that performs like this, that still looks like a very well-designed skateboard and can be carried with one hand, for me, is a really big deal, because there's a lot of boards out there that, of course, are bamboo, are more powerful than this, might even come in cheaper than this, but they're starting to move away from looking like skateboards, and they look like more purpose-built electric vehicles other than skateboards. This is still very much a board, and it's one of the things that I love about this the most. I want it to look and feel like a skateboard, but perform like something that's been made by a mad scientist. And that's exactly what I feel the Diablo Bamboo encompasses. Now, from there, looking at the top speed, I've been able to hit 32 miles an hour on this board. That's not something I'm able to do every single time I go out on the board. If it's at 100%, I've been able to hit 32 miles an hour on the 7-inch 80 wheels with a 66 tooth gear setup, which is the standard setup from Evolve. If they made a 47 tooth gear that would fit on the Diablo Bamboo, I can't imagine what the top speed would be with the 6-inch wheels or even with the 7-inch wheels. It'd be mental. Maybe I hope that's something they look at doing. It might be a bit unsafe, but I'd definitely be one to try that. If anyone knows where I can get one aftermarket, comment down below and let me know. But top speed, max 32 miles an hour, but 31 miles an hour is the advertised top speed, which is definitely achievable. The acceleration on this board is also much more aggressive than what we saw previously on the Hadean Bamboo series. Off the line, this board, it takes a bit of getting used to, because it is quite an aggressive start in Corsa mode, which is the highest mode that the board has on it. And this isn't tweaking with the settings on the app. This is just how it comes straight out the box. Acceleration, I have no arguments there. You can get around what you need to get around in traffic, but a big upgrade that you see on this board is when you're in motion and you want to give the board some juice. That's one of the biggest features that you notice that is different from the Hadean series versus the Diablo series. If you smash that accelerator while you're doing 20 miles an hour, even 25, 28 miles an hour, the board gives you a lovely boost of power to be able to get around what you need to get around. And that mid power was what was so lacking in the previous generation of Evolve boards that they have corrected in the Diablo very, very well. Now that leads us really nicely onto the range and also the braking. Now braking, because of those bigger motors and that wider base because of the wider trucks, I feel is much, much smoother. It's even a little bit more aggressive as well, because the bigger motors definitely help this board come to a stop really nicely. Good brakes. Going fast is one thing. You want to make sure that you can stop, and this board has no issues being able to do that. Now the range I'm able to get on this board is between 25 and 27 miles. The reason it's probably different depending on if you've seen the Carbon video is because, like I said, I ride the Carbon board very differently. This board, I'm crouched down, I'm low, I'm extending my legs during my stride, I'm absolutely carving the living life of this board, sliding around on the roads like a crackhead. Carving like a crackhead. That's exactly what I like to do in this board, and that has a massive impact on the range. 30 miles isn't something that's really achievable for me in this board because of how I ride this Bamboo as opposed to the way I would ride the Carbon. So the range I'm able to get, 27, still sits nicely with me. It's an improvement on what I saw previously, because if I rode the Hadean like a crackhead, I wouldn't come close to 27 miles of range. So this is a big upgrade that I appreciate and definitely allows me to ride around for the better part of a day. If I had a fast charger, it'd be the whole day, which is another debate. But range 27 miles, I'm still pleased with that. But I'll always say that range is incredibly subjective. It's based on your build, the conditions that you're riding on. Loose gravel, grass, sand, that type of stuff will rip the range a hell of a lot more than riding on asphalt or concrete will. Now, of course, your build has a big impact as well, but the style of rider that you are will have the biggest impact on your range. Because there's people out there that will be like, I can get 50 miles of range. Like, how can you only get 30? Because I ride like a crackhead and I'm riding sideways and I'm smashing the accelerator as I'm coming out of my curves, and the wheels are trying to grip onto the asphalt for dear life, which has a big impact on the range. So always bear in mind that when you watch a review and you hear about the range, it's incredibly subjective. Now, when we move on to the price of the Diablo Bamboo, it's £1,699. I'll put it on screen in case it's changed, and this might be an early bird special price as well, which, of course, this is going to be that argument. I said this in the video when we looked at the Carbon. There is boards out there that are cheaper than that, or the same price as that have more power, more this, more that, more everything. But as I said in the initial first impressions video when I looked at the Diablo Bamboo, Evolve is Apple. Whether you like it or you hate me saying that, that's what they are. Now, when you look at an Apple product like a Mac Studio, a MacBook Pro, an iPhone 15 Pro, for that money, are there devices out there that do the same job to a higher standard or more power, you could say, that gives you essentially more bang for your buck? Of course there is. Now, these devices out there that do the same jobs better with more power and they're cheaper if not the same money, why would you pick that over an Apple product or vice versa? None of these devices out there that are the Apple alternatives look the same as them. They are not designed like them. I don't care what you say, Apple has their finger on the pulse of design and making a product look enticing, just like Evolve. On top of that, the ease of use is one of the single reasons iPhones are the most sold phone on planet Earth, because anyone can pick one up and figure out how it works very quickly. Now, does that mean that you pay for the performance if you want to have something in Apple that performs incredibly well? Yeah, you will have Apple's tax applied to that. But what is Apple renowned for aside from their incredible designs? That's going to be their customer service, like Evolve. They have retailers all over the world. That means that you can take your device or your board into the store, get help from face-to-face people, but that means that you don't have to deal with someone and go through your problems by triaging via email or WhatsApp with somebody in Asia, trying to figure out the time difference, waiting 3-4 days for a reply, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, then finally figuring out what the problem is and waiting for the part to get shipped from China all the way to the UK. You don't have to do that. I could take my board to Northampton, drop it off in the store, speak to a human being, and then come back and pick it up or have it shipped out, which to me is worth paying a premium because of the level of service that you get, because of the build quality, the reliability, and more importantly, the fact that they have retail presence all over the world. That comes with added costs, and those costs are reflected in the products that they sell. Whether you like it or you don't like it, that's the truth of it. And maybe that isn't for everyone, which is fine. Apple products aren't for everyone because there's the alternative, there's Android. It's just a case of figuring out what you need and what works for you as a customer or a rider. And for me, this is what I want. I don't want to pick up an Android device and have to tweak it and adjust it and repair it myself and get parts shipped in and make all the repairs and adjustments to the device myself. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to learn how to do this and do that. I don't want to have to do anything DIY related whatsoever. The most DIY thing I'm going to do is change the wheel setups on the board and change the gears. That's it. That's all I want to do. And there's a lot of riders out there that feel the same way, that want to buy a product that looks sick, that looks still like a skateboard, that performs to a high level, which is what Evolve have finally done with the Diablo series, and not have to worry about pissing about with programming and apps and opening up the board yourself. None of that crap. They just want to get on and ride, and if something goes wrong, they have someone to talk to on a phone or in person. And that's what Evolve is. Whether you like it or not, that's how the cookie crumbles. Now, overall, guys, I think that you can tell that I'm a really big fan of this board. I think the fact that they've been able to hone in and improve the ride of the Diablo Bamboo versus the Hadean Bamboo is unreal. This board sits miles above the Hadean, not just because of the power, but the top speed is going to be a big thing for me, and the improved battery life and the thicker deck, so it's a much more durable deck. You don't have to worry about this deck snapping or breaking or anything like that. Overall, everything that I wanted them to do to correct what they released with the Hadean is exactly what they've done with this Diablo Bamboo. I have no complaints. Because I've been riding a Renegade a lot, the only thing that I want done to this board, aside from the fast charger that you guys are well aware of, is if it was an inch longer. Now, an inch makes a big difference, lads. It feels like, because I'm so used to having my feet wider apart because of riding the Renegade, I feel like if this was an inch longer, I'd have a hell of a lot more of a better experience on it. But that's just because I've gotten too used to riding the Renegade. I need to ride this for a little bit longer so I can adjust to the length and the width of this board. But overall, aside from fast chargers, I've got no critiques. The top speed is perfect now. The range is more than adequate for me. Charge time isn't phenomenal. It's about 4 hours, and that's not if you run the board all the way down to 0. If you run it down to 0 and it's not moving, it will take a little bit longer than 4 hours to charge. But if you leave a few percent in there, somewhere between 10 and 12%, you'll be able to get the board charged up in about 4 hours, which sits okay for me. But if you're wondering if this is a significant improvement over the Hadean Bamboo, in terms of every metric and element you can judge an electric skateboard on, it absolutely is. And if you're thinking about picking this up, I would strongly recommend it because it is, for me, the most skateboard looking electric board that's out there, but it performs unbelievably well. Now, if there's anything I've not covered in this video, comment down below and let me know, and I'll try to get to it as quickly as I can. If you're considering picking up one of the Diablo boards, I'll have a link down below in the video description with a £50 off or a $50 off coupon code that you can use to save yourself some money, and it also gives me a little kickback as well. but all those links will be down below in the video description. Make sure that you follow us on Instagram so you can keep up to what we're doing on a weekly basis, and hopefully there'll be more videos dropping. Let me know what you want to see next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and thumbs up if you like this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, guys.